say hello to the new G, the new Force Gurkha. Now, if you recall, this was shown at the Auto Expo nearly 2 years ago, and now it is here, and it really is all new. New chassis, new suspension, new body, new engine. Well, more or less new engine. I'll come to that later on. New interiors. Everything is new on this Gurkha. Yet it retains that ability and also the mechanical components that makes it India's most capable, most hardcore off-roader. This is a great time to be a 4x4 enthusiast. And before we go ahead, let me remind you to hit that bell icon, stay notified for all our videos, and give us a thumbs up because there's going to be plenty of action in this video. We have been waiting for this new Gurkha for a while now. We saw it at the Auto Expo. It was supposed to be out within a year, but then obviously the pandemic put the brakes on Force Motors' work. But now it is here, and this is something to definitely get excited by. Now let's start with what's new, which frankly is every single thing. This body, every single panel is new. Even though it looks like the old Gurkha, that has been done on purpose because this is such an iconic shape, and Force Motors, they don't shy away from calling this G-Wagon inspired because this is G-Wagon inspired, and they're being completely honest about it. It also looks very much like the G-Wagon, which is a great thing because you're getting a G-Wagon, at least something that looks like a G-Wagon, at properly Indian prices. We don't know what this is going to be priced at, but it can't be too far off the Thar, can it? What do you think of the Gurkha styling? Let us know in the comments below. I am a huge fan of the way it looks, except for the nose. With that Gurkha styling, I don't like that too much, but then styling is personal. What you like, I might not like, and vice versa. I would probably put a G-Wagon inspired grille up front and be done with everything else. It looks so iconic. Nice, sharp, straight lines. It's the mind's image of a proper hardcore off-roader. And especially in this orange, this is also inspired by Mercedes-Benz with the crazy colors on the G-Wagon. This will turn so many more heads than any other equivalent 4x4 on the road. So all new body, and the benefit of that is the remarkably improved NVH levels. For starters, this has got a single piece firewall, so all the grumbly diesel engine noises, they don't come into the cabin, and this actually is pretty refined. Of course, the engine, now I did tell you this is a new engine, and it is new when you compare it with the outgoing Gurkha, because the outgoing Gurkha, it got a 2.2 litre diesel. This now gets the 2.6 litre diesel engine, which actually in terms of lineage dates back to before the 2.2. So this is a Mercedes engine which has been given to Force Motors. The gearbox is a Mercedes gearbox that has been given to Force Motors. And this same engine is also used in the Traveller and all those commercial vehicles that Force Motors makes. This is BS6 compliant. The 2.2, it would have cost way too much to upgrade it to BS6 emission norms, especially for just the Gurkha, because the volumes of the Gurkha, they don't really justify it. So it gets the 2.6 litre diesel engine. The benefit is the capacity, it results in lot of torque. So it gets 250 Newton meters of torque, horsepower, 90 horsepower, 90 PS of power. So it's not a firecracker when you compare it with, say, the Thar, which gets the turbo petrol engine, or even that new 2.2 diesel engine. This is not as quick, and also there is a fair bit of turbo lag, so you gotta keep it above 1800 RPM and then it goes smoothly, but below that it struggles. You have to like rev it. But this is a big hearted engine, and it makes for easy cruising, easy chugging along. And I did mention that it is actually pretty refined. It had a door made in 3 parts. This is a normal single piece door as we know it from modern automobiles. At the back, you get a wide expanse of glass. It is a glued in glass, so you can't open it, but the benefit is obviously NVH. And on the highway, which again we will talk about in a bit, there isn't too much of wind rustle and that tornado that you get inside the SUV like you would get in other 4x4s. The chassis, it is a body on ladder frame like the old Gurkha, but this is now engineered to meet crash compliance, and that has been done by Akimoto in Japan and Idiada in Spain. So it meets all current and future crash test regulations. In fact, they say that if they were to upgrade that old Gurkha platform to crash compliance, that would have cost much more than just engineering a brand new chassis. So this chassis, it is also shared with the new Trax, the utility vehicle. That is also one of the bread and butter things that Force Motors has got going on. But this is the short wheelbase. This is the 3-door. There will be a 5-door very soon, but for now, we get the 3-door on this short wheelbase. And like in the past, the Gurkha retains 4-wheel independent suspension. If you recall, the Gurkha, even in the past, it did not have leaf springs at the back. It had independent rear suspension. This too has got independent rear, and the benefit is very good ride quality over these broken village roads. These tracks, this is easy peasy. This is 2-wheel drive stuff. It's not even going to get the Gurkha into a sweat. But over these tracks, you don't get thrown around. The rear, it does not jolt you. It does not give you that sharp shocks. It actually soaks it up really well. This IP, the instrument panel, the cluster, the seats, everything on the interiors are all new. And well, it doesn't feel very contemporary. The steering wheel, for instance, it is a massive thing and it's not very stylish. The design of the dash also, it is not very stylish. It is utilitarian, but it doesn't feel very old. So it is acceptable. You get a 7-inch infotainment. This is an aftermarket Kenwood infotainment system, but you do get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You get all the creature comforts. You get air conditioning. You don't get climate control, but air conditioning is good enough. You get power windows. You don't get an automatic gearbox. That will come, but that is going to take some time. So for now, you have a 5-speed manual gearbox. You get the proper follow, and you get these 2 levers, and that's what's special about the Gurkha. The locking differential on the front and the rear axle. The twin locking differentials are what gives the Gurkha crazy capabilities, demonstrated here on this axle articulation test. Locking the diff means with even one wheel in the air, the Gurkha can keep going. The torque proportioned equally between both the wheels and not wasted away in uselessly spinning the wheel that is in the air. And on the Gurkha, you can lock both the front and rear axle or just either one of them depending on the terrain. The only 2 things, well, 3 things now, that have more mechanical components for off-road ability are the G-Wagon, the Jeep Wrangler and the Land Rover Defender. Otherwise, for an Indian mint vehicle, nothing comes close in terms of the kit that the Gurkha has. The driving experience of the Gurkha has always been special, and that thankfully does not change with this new Gurkha. You get excellent visibility. You can see the absolute edges of the bonnet, and it's got these pilot lights which look so cool from the outside, but on the inside they also help you place it with absolute precision. It is a very airy and roomy cabin. Look at the amount of headroom that I have. This much headroom, this much free headroom. So it is spacious, it is comfortable, it is wide, so there is a lot of space. Now I have to show you the back seat of the Gurkha, and you enter rather unconventionally. From the back. Now there's enough space for you to squeeze in between these seats because both the seats are captain seats. You also get these armrests for each seat, and this front seat is adjusted to my driving position, and there is an inch of free knee room, so that's okay. There's a lot of free headroom and this huge glass area that actually makes the cabin feel quite airy. There is space to rest your arm, so actually it is quite comfortable. But I have to point out, you only get a lap belt. You don't get a proper 3-point seat belt if you're sitting at the back. So that is a miss. But otherwise, there is enough space out here. There's no digital cluster on the Gurkha, so I'm telling you that before you even go asking. This is old school analog dials, but this is an old school off-roader. The steering, for instance, this is not electric power steering. This is proper hydraulic power steering. So you can feel everything on the road. There is constant feedback, communication, and also kickback. So it's constantly jiggling around in your hand. But that experience is something now to treasure and to really revel in. You got to appreciate the Gurkha for what it is. And that is, at hardcore off-roader, that was the Gurkha, which has been civilized, which has been tamed. So now you can use the Gurkha as a daily driver. It's perfectly usable. The clutch is light, the steering little bit heavy, but power assisted, so you can use it in the city without a problem. The iconic styling, it's retained. The ability, that's retained. So basically, you're getting a modernized hardcore off-roader that in some variation is also used by the Indian Army as a light strike vehicle. In fact, recently, the Gurkha light strike vehicle, it was airdropped out of a helicopter in front of the defense minister during a demonstration in Ladakh, just to show the army's capability to deploy these vehicles into forward positions. They attack, they do whatever maneuvers they're supposed to do, and they can retreat quickly. And that's based on the same vehicle, the same Gurkha. And if it's good enough for the Indian Army's strike capability, it's good enough for you and me. Now the Gurkha, it does not get ESP, but it gets ABS, it gets EBD, it gets 2 front airbags. This is all mandated by regulation, so that's why it's all there. In fact, the old Gurkha, it stopped production in 2019 when the new safety regulations were mandated. So now this is upgraded, and this is already seeing interest from the Indian Army. Off-road ability is something that the Gurkha always had by the bucket loads. The 4-wheel independent suspension gave it good axle articulation. The diff locks gave it great traction, and just the general dimensions, the mechanical components, everything on the Gurkha made it absolutely incredible off the road. And the new one, it actually has gotten better because the suspension is better tuned. It can take this beating without giving occupants a beating, which is a great thing, because while the earlier Gurkha could do everything and more, the occupants, they really felt it. With the new Gurkha, off-roading has become easier, which is always a good thing. This engine also, it has plenty of grunt to make quick work of these trails. The other important thing that was pointed out is this turning circle. They claim it's best in class, and that helps it takes these tight U-turns and hairpins with ease. The gearbox also smoother in terms of operation, so again contributing to making the Gurkha easier to drive. The Gurkha did not really need any more off-road ability, and that's why Force Motors did not mess with what was right on the Gurkha. They just made it more civilized, nicer to drive, easier to drive, more comfortable in all kinds of conditions. So the Gurkha, it has been tamed. It has been made better for on-road use. Let's find out if it actually works on road. Climbing up the hills, the Gurkha, it has plenty of low-end grunt, plenty of poke to make driving like this quite effortless. It feels like those old-school diesel engines that have plenty of pulling power. Even the ride quality over these typical Indian roads, it's actually quite good. Of course, this is a body on ladder frame on a short wheelbase, so definitely it has got that slight bit of unsettled ride. And you can constantly feel that the suspension is working, that the car is moving around and jiggling about a bit, but it's not uncomfortable. And also a big contributor to the comfort and the long distance ability are these new seats, which are actually very comfortable. They are wide, they're spacious, they support you in all the right places. It just adds to that feeling of the Gurkha having been civilized for today's generation. There's something to be said for these old school off-roaders that have been modernized, but they still retain that old world charm. I am a huge fan of it. Okay, this is not very practical. No three-door vehicle is practical. It probably can't be your everyday car. It can't be the only car, or it can. If you are willing to live with a few compromises, it could be your only and everyday car. What would I like? An automatic gearbox for sure. But apart from that, I'd be quite happy with something like this. And especially with the number of heads this new Gurkha turns, you'll be the talk of the town. In terms of ride quality, we talked about it on the off-road trails, and on the highway too. It's very planted and stable. It does feel a bit top heavy now in terms of the dimensions. It has become a little wider compared to the earlier Gurkha, but it is very tall. Look at the amount of headroom that I have. And this is an all metal body. It's not a fiber top. So the benefit is on the highways when you're doing say 80 kilometers per hour like I'm doing right now, there's no wind rustle and wind noise. So that way, in terms of refinement, this metal body actually is very good. But when you're going over some corners, slightly bumpy roads, it does feel top heavy. But like over these broken patches, the ride is good. Little audible, but the ride is good. The steering response, precision. This is an old school off-roader, so you're not going to get too much of it. It is a hydraulic power steering, so that's something that you do get. But don't go asking for all those sporty SUV traits. So it goes up to 3,200 RPM and then you upshift. But it picks up speed quite well. At least when you're sitting so high up, this feels enough. And the grip is also fine when you are chucking it around bends. The main takeaway is just how easy the Gurkha now is to live with. In terms of the ride quality, in terms of the ease of driving, the ease of the gear shift, the refinement of the engine, the ease of the power delivery, the comfort in the suspension. It's all sorted now. And genuinely, you can use this as your daily driver. Even the brakes feel quite alright. This is something that Force Motors can justifiably be proud of. If I have to criticize, I would criticize the interiors because this looks a little too basic in this day and age. But I can also understand where they're coming from because this IP is shared with the tracks, the commercial vehicle, and the reason why they've been able to do the Gurkha is because of the volumes that the tracks gives it. So that is the compromise that you have to live with, and it's a compromise that is well worth making. Because if it wasn't for that, they would not have a new Gurkha. And that would be a shame because the Gurkha, while volumes have always been small, it's always been such a cool part of our Indian off-road heritage. So the refinement, the engine is pottering around at 1400 RPM. It's quiet, no noise. Wouldn't think that this is a Gurkha, at least if you have experience of the Gurkha from the past. A remarkable improvement. Nobody really needs an off-roader in their lives, but when you have a proper hardcore 4x4 like this new Gurkha, you can get out, explore, discover places such as these, which honestly might not be too far from where you stay. In fact, this place is very close to where we stay, yet this is the first time we've actually come out here, and that's thanks to the insane abilities of this new Gurkha. That said, the Gurkha has become tamer, more civilized. You can actually live with it on a daily basis. You can drive it around in the city, no problem, and it can actually take 4 in comfort on long drives as well. Plus, in the city, very few things will turn heads like the Gurkha. This looks insane, yet it has lost none of its abilities. With those twin locking differentials and the insane capabilities, you can go far, really go out and explore our countryside. And honestly, India is a beautiful, beautiful country.
Subscribe to the Evo India channel and hit the bell icon to keep pace with the thrill of driving.